Thank you, gentlemen, for your appearance today and your service to our country, not least in your youth in the armed forces of the United States. Dr. Kissinger, I want to return to a point that you raised in your opening statement as well as your written testimony. I'll just repeat it. You pointed out a paradox, the possibility that in North Korea, as in Iran, an international effort intended to prevent a radical regime from developing a destabilizing capability will coincide diplomatically with the regime perfecting that very capacity. For the second time in a decade, an outcome that was widely considered unacceptable is now on the verge of becoming irreversible. Could you elaborate on why you think that's the case and what we could learn from the situation?
With respect to North Korea, there is the idea that there might be a negotiation based on a freeze for freeze. The concern I had with the Iranian agreement was that, in a way, it legitimized the eventual emergence of Iran as a nuclear power. It only delayed it by some years. The situation with North Korea is even more acute because Iran did not yet have a nuclear weapon. But if one negotiates a freeze of the existing situation, one has thereby legitimized a Korean military capability. And if that is established, other countries in the region confronting their own security problems are likely to come to the conclusion that it is safe to proceed with their nuclear program, and that then we would face a totally new situation, where in a region in which there are considerable tensions, there is also an accumulation of nuclear weapons, and that once this line is crossed, as George Schultz pointed out, you are then in a world in which we have no experience about escalation, where it's difficult to establish the principles. And this would then start, in my opinion, a sequence of events in which some countries would resist this and other countries would insist on it. So therefore, I think the denuclearization of North Korea, which is not a direct, overwhelming threat to us, is important for the evolution of the international strategy with respect to non-proliferation. And therefore, we need to make a distinction between measures that might relieve the immediate tension but make an ultimate crisis all the more severe, and measures that need to be taken or could be taken to face the issue of the denuclearization of Korea, all the more so as the problem of Iran is just down the road, even under the existing deals. That is my basic point.
Thank you. Dr. Schultz, in your conversation about four disruptive forces, the first one you mentioned was demography and migration. Another eminent historian, Walter Russell Mead, who has testified in front of this panel before, published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago, stressing that even though this has been a source of controversy in the United States, on which we understandably focus as Americans, we just had a 3-day government shutdown about immigration. The issue was a very contentious one in our campaign. It also is very contentious in Europe. In the elections in Germany last year, the SPD and the CDU had their lowest performance since World War II. Alternative for Germany won seats in the Bundestag for the first time. And you've seen the rise of similar parties and politicians in Sweden and Austria and Czechia, Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, and so forth. What ought Western leaders be doing to better manage the challenges posed by demographic change and migration patterns?
I should think the first effort should be to do everything we can to see that the places that people are coming from are made more habitable so they don't leave. And we have lots of things that we could do that would accomplish that, I think. But then we have to reflect in our own case how beneficial immigration has been for this country. I went to a session in San Francisco the other night where we were celebrating our old mint there, and it was Alexander Hamilton's birthday. And we were all talking about how wonderful Alexander Hamilton was as our first Secretary of Treasury. He was an immigrant. Henry Kissinger is an immigrant. Einstein was an immigrant. So we've benefited greatly. I dare say everybody in this room is either an immigrant or descended from one. So we need to be looking carefully at our borders and having a sensible immigration policy. And people in these places, there may be people that are perfectly okay for us. But I think the first thing is to do everything possible to help them have places where they want to stay.
Thank you all, gentlemen.